Hey guys, welcome to this new podcast. This is my first ever podcast actually. It's my first episode for the 98 Dice podcast as well. So before we begin, I actually have some stuff to announce. So one of the stuff is that I want to shout out to Vista for being a long-term channel member and also, well, for supporting the things that I've done and inspiring me to create the series. Without everything that you've done, I wouldn't have been able to get this far, and I really thank you for this. And the other thing that I want to mention is that this is my first podcast, and it's not really something that I'm used to, so just bear in mind of that. And I also have some stuff to address about the series podcasting. First is that this is a different episode because there is no main topic that I'm talking about. It's just kind of an intro, so there's not really much about the whole topic oriented stuff. It's more of like just a routine kind of thing. It will be different from the future podcast episodes. This is just the intro, so it's just different. The other thing that I want to mention is I will be addressing some of the questions, like the structural basis questions, which are like the deep thinking questions and all of this, and how the series is set up, and the frequently asked questions, which are questions that are asked a lot about the series. And the other one is about questions from my viewers. In the community post that I posted a while back, I actually asked you guys to ask some questions about the series, and I'll be addressing some of them in this episode. And also I want to mention that this is hosted once every other week because I don't want to pile up this stuff into one into one podcast, because then I would just run out of stuff to talk about instantly. So I want to do this gradually. So yeah, let's get started. So let's get started with the frequently asked questions first. So this is not really a question, it's just basically a statement about how my series is similar to Vista's series, animation series, which are like Vista Dies, Seven's Final Days, Seven Dies. So I want to say that it's actually been similar this whole time, ever since the start. In fact, I've actually made so many references to Seven's Final Days before, especially in part 1, where you see stuff like, the coffee stuff, because the coffee is a reference to Seven's Final Days and how Seven, and I think it was Windows 10 or 8 or something, that went with him to the Costa Coffee area, and they drank coffee and stuff. So that was kind of one of the references. And the other reference is actually in part 5 of. It's kind of funny because all of the parts are corresponding at some point, I guess. In Seven's Final Days Part 5, there was a reference. In 98 Dies Part 5, there was a reference to Seven's Final Days Part 5, which was the fighting animation about Deepin fighting Windows, and that was a reference to, that was referenced to the scene where Linux Mint fights XP in the 98 Dice series, and yeah, that's kind of one of the examples. The other thing is that in the prologue you also see that part, but I actually didn't really get that inspiration stuff. Not inspiration. I didn't get that reference. I thought it was just from 98 Dies this whole time at this point, because it's been years since I worked on it, and I just completely forgot until they brought this question up. My viewers brought this question up and stuff. So yeah, that's one of the questions. And the other question that I get asked a lot is why did I restart the series in the first place? So this is a pretty detailed question, detailed answer, but first, I want to say that the series generally lacked a lot of detail, not only in terms of visual detail, but in story detail. And there are things like the fighting animations, which I know they're really good and they're cool, but it was getting kind of repetitive, and I needed to not use that kind of stuff all the time. And I also had roadblocks in part 9, in the old part 9, and editing limitations, which, I mean, quote-unquote limitations. Like, in part 9, I initially proposed myself some ideas about putting Mario into the whole stuff, like with, because Debian and the others were finding Chicago and all of those people. Well, I initially wanted to make it so that there would be 3D Mario, but that just ended up being so difficult to animate because I had to use an emulator, which was even more difficult because it was completely disconnected from the well, let's just say the editing software. So I couldn't really get stuff done at that point, and I just stopped working on it for so long. And then I tried to reboot it again, but it didn't work because that portal stuff was also kind of a roadblock, because after that I had to, I think, recreate the whole story in the script. Like, the script, I had to recreate the whole thing because it just felt messy to me, and I didn't really have, well, a lot of plans. And then I eventually also stopped that, which is due to stuff like demotivation, for example, which was at its primitive age back then, because you know, only this year did I actually get my time management and also procrastination stuff away, and it was really kind of a challenge to get things done. And yeah, that was kind of one of the things. And I did post I did post the Windows 98 Dies Part 9a, but that was the thing that just stopped because, well, I mentioned earlier, I just got demotivated and stuff, and I had to recreate the whole thing because it felt so messy, and I really was kind of getting frustrated with all of this messiness that was going on, or at least I thought of it that way, even though I think it could have gone better, but yeah. And at this point, when I just wanted to continue the series, I just had to restart because it just felt so messy, and it was really just a mess at this point, and I didn't really have any choice, I guess. And I think it was a wise decision to restart the series. The other thing that I want to mention is, well, the fighting animations are still gonna be in the series, just so you guys know, but it's not gonna be as frequent as you guys might think because, well, repetitiveness kind of results in a boring animation, and I don't want that. So yeah, that sums up for my frequently asked questions. I'm gonna be addressing 2 each podcast at least, but it might differ. I don't know. I'll be thinking about this. So yeah. And now, next up, we have viewer questions. So, Rhapsody asks a question about this series. So, will Windows betas other than Longhorn make appearances? Most of them, yes. Right now, Chicago and Whistler are already in the series, and also Longhorn. Because the timeline is still set at around July 10th at this point, because the 98 Def stuff is happening, you know, in part 1. They're still in 2006, so there's not really a new code name that's popping up until, I think, Vista's release. And after Vista's release is when they started working on Windows 7, and that's when I can only add the, well, the code names, like Blackcomb and Vienna. I can't really add them right now. I don't even know if I'm gonna add Vienna, because Vienna is already in the Vista Dies and whatnot, but yeah. And the other question is from Windows 2000. How important will Windows 2000 be as a character? Well, as far as I know so far, I mean, he has been a prominent character, even in the next part, actually. He is actually a lot more prominent in the next part, but I won't be spoiling the whole stuff because, well, you know, obvious things. And in the prologue, he's already been a pretty prominent character because he's been a friend of 98, and 98 has been in the spotlight for a while now in that prologue part. And he will still stay as an important character throughout at least several parts. And I'm not sure how he will turn out in the future parts, but because I'm not really done with anything like the script for those parts yet. But yeah, I hope that sums up your question. So now we get into the whole complicated stuff. So this is about the structure behind the series. So it stands for Structural Basis Questions, and I'm going to be talking about how the whole series is set up. So for example, you can ask something like how the world differs from, well, the real life world. It's kind of like this deep thinking question which I've mentioned earlier. But I hope you guys can try to understand and wrap your mind around it. And yeah, let's get started with the first question of this podcast relating this. Why do operating systems, Windows operating systems, not know when they end support until the very end? Well, in the series, I intentionally made it so that Bill Gates, as the Microsoft CEO, is being portrayed as a deity in the world, where the operating systems worship him, while Microsoft is a helper of Gates, just like in the real world, where Bill Gates is the CEO, at that time that is, and Microsoft is helping him develop these things, which are led by a bunch of leaders and stuff, you know. And in the series, I made it so that Bill Gates is perfect, but Microsoft isn't. So Microsoft sometimes, like, as the developer, I try to kind of reflect on the real life section, because like the Longhorn project, for example, where they made a terrible mistake about their like stability stuff and all of that, resulting in a reset. So I portrayed that as a mistake that, as that Microsoft isn't perfect and sometimes makes mistakes, which Chicago actually mentioned in the prologue, that the project wasn't really going well and that they had to reset, and thankfully it's going well and all of that. So that's kind of one of the examples behind how Microsoft isn't perfect in this series. And I'm saying this because I want to emphasize on how the operating system world is disconnected from the human world. There are some similarities, there are many similarities of the real life world to the operating system world in the series, but there's just also a lot of differences that I want to emphasize and make clear of, because I don't want this to be kind of like uncovered, you know? And there's just so much about this stuff that I can't really cover in this episode alone. So I'll have to do this through multiple podcasts and podcast episodes, and it will just take a while to debrief, you know? And that kind of wraps it around for the podcast. I know it's only like 13 minutes in-ish, but I've got some stuff to announce before I leave this podcast. It's that, well, first of all, part 1 is getting released on the 18th, so stay tuned for that. And it's going to be a lot more different than the prologue, which is more of like a relaxing kind of, no, it's not really relaxing, but, well, it felt calmer, you know? But I'm just giving you guys a heads up that it's a lot more intensive than you guys might think. And yeah, stay tuned at June 18th. I'll be looking forward to see you guys, and thank you guys so much for tuning in to the podcast. I'll be starting another one every other week, which is 2 weeks later, and thank you guys for tuning in. Cheers.